And all right, we live.
Okay.
So our last conversation, we talked about Mark, or we were in Mark chapter 7,
Mm-hmm.
and we got to the whole defiled conversation and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and let me text Kayla, make sure she know. But I went to look more into it because I knew okay. I knew that there was something missing from the conversation, but I wasn't prepared to talk about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it would have took too long for me to get to the sources. Like I know it's out there, but you know what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
I didn't have time to go because I wasn't sure exactly where to go, and all that. So anyway, so we're today. This may not be the last time we talk about this, but I think I have enough to present something to you to at least give you something to go on, so you understand why I understand that passage to mean something different than what you were seeing there. You know?
Right. Hold on 1 second.
All right.
All right. Sorry about that. So yeah.
All right. Which
So we have Mark 7:14. That's where we start?
It's around 18, 19. But first, I asked you something when we got offline, and you said you know I should have asked you when we was on, so you could say that on the in the conversation that was live. So I'm gonna ask you now: is that enough? Would that be enough for you to say that all foods were lawful to eat because Jesus said it there, or you think he said it there? You know what I mean?
Right. So let me just look at it real quick. It is Mark 7 and
the part we were talking about was around 18, 19, but the couple of verses before that give you, it's more,
right. Okay, so I'll start at 17. So he says, and when he had entered the house and left the people, his disciples asked him about the parable. And he said to them, then are you also without understanding? Do you not see that whatever goes into a person from outside cannot defile him, since it enters not his heart but his stomach, and is expelled? Thus he declared all foods clean, is what my Bible says. I understand that that's a side note. And he said, what comes out of a person is what defiles him.
mm-hmm.
For from within, out of the heart of a man come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a person. Okay, so you asked me, are those few verses enough for me to conclude that Jesus was declaring all foods to be clean?
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
No, I won't say that. I'll just take just those few verses, and I will make my judgment on that, or make my decision on what I believe that to mean. But it does raise the question of him saying that. I mean, he clearly, what his message in this was that what comes out of you as far as your thoughts, your actions, the things that you do, the things that come from your heart are really like what defiles you, or what the evil thoughts that you have. That's what makes you unclean, and
But no,
not
see,
what.
oh, sorry, go ahead. You said a word, it triggered something, but go ahead, sorry.
Okay, so I won't use unclean. That's what defiles you. Um, not the food that you eat. I mean, that is what he's saying in this verse. But do I take that to mean that we are then free to eat whatever? I don't know, but it does
Based,
raise. But it
yeah,
does raise the
based
question.
on, but yeah, I know, just like based on that one, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I know there's other things that people go to, right?
Hmm.
Um, so what you need to, or we need to understand is, what is he saying right there? Because you said it again, and we were both saying it last time. We were saying unclean because we assume that defiled uh, means unclean, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I did too. I actually had to learn something from that conversation I had never even seen before, and it was, I'm glad we went through that, because it opened up a lot of it opened up a lot of scriptures for me,
Yeah.
learning what that word means
Hmm.
and recognizing something I didn't even know. Like uh, I didn't even know there was anything there. Basically, just put it that way.
Yeah.
So let's dang, I don't know where to go first. I wanted to go to Peter. Should I go with Peter, or should I go? I want
Go
to
to
show
Peter.
you something. Let's do this. I'm gonna share my screen in a second. I just gotta pull up what I'm looking for.
Okay.
Acts 10, and I don't know where he said it, but it's in here somewhere. Okay. Okay. If we go to Acts chapter 10, verse 14, I'm gonna share my screen now. So it'll be up there. You don't have to like go look for it.
On
All right.
the
Or yeah, if you want to, Um,
no, I'm quick with quick with the page flipping. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Do my thing. I'll be there.
uh, I'm sure you can see some version. There's a bunch of versions there, but uh, he says, it's just Peter talking. He has a vision, and it says, "But Peter said, 'Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean.'" Right. So
Hmm.
he named two different things. So and those things are not the same.
Hmm.
Common and unclean aren't the same, right?
Hmm.
So you would have to now, and this is where we have to remember the context of Mark 7. He's talking to Pharisees who have this tradition of washing their hands and all this stuff uh, before they eat, right?
Hmm.
And specifically before they eat bread. Like that's a
Hmm.
big thing, and the reason is because the priests have to do all these washings and stuff like that,
Hmm.
and the Pharisees committed to being as pure as the priest, right?
Hmm.
So that's why they did all that washing. And now I'm gonna go to Mark 7, and I'm gonna pull up the whole thing, because that whole chapter is what we're really. If you go to Mark 7, come down to uh, chapter or Mark 7, And we can start at verse 1. So it says, then came together unto him the Pharisees and certain of the scribes which came from Jerusalem. And when they saw some of his disciples eat bread with defiled, that is to say, with unwashed hands, they found fault. For the Pharisees and all the Jews, except they wash their hands oft, eat not, holding the tradition of the elders. And when they come from the market, except they wash, they eat not. And many other things there be which they have received to hold, as the washing of cups and pots, brazen vessels, and of tables. Then the Pharisees and scribes asked him, why walk not thy disciples according to the tradition of the elders, but eat bread with unwashed hands? Right?
Uh-huh.
So there was a view that bread was because bread is used in temple service and worship and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
They viewed bread as being a little more sanctified than other things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they would wash their hands, especially coming from the market, because there's all kind of stuff there. And they would wash their hands because they didn't want to pollute the bread, right? So when did we go to Peter yet?
No.
Okay. So what they would say is that there's clean, there's unclean, and then somewhere in the middle there's common, right? So common is like something that is not necessarily unclean according to like the law, but it has been made common because it's no longer a holy. So you have clean, unclean, and then you have holy and common, right?
Mm-hmm.
Holy, that is just set apart, and that's what the Pharisees called them. They were trying to be set apart from everybody else, like to be holy. So, for example, if you have a bunch of cups and you pick one cup and say, I'm always going to drink wine out of this cup, and that's it. You set that cup apart for that purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
The things that are considered holy, like vessels and pots and stuff like that, those were set apart for the priestly duties and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to the Pharisees, they consider themselves to be set apart, and they had in their mind that if you take in that food that is polluted with your dirty hands, now it makes you common.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So the reason I kind of stopped you on the defiled part is because we got to look at the definition, right? But I asked you, we didn't go to Peter, right? Or did we?
No, not yet. No, we didn't yet.
I thought we did just go to Peter. I'm tripping.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so then we go.
Acts.
Oh yeah, and he said, "I've never eaten anything common."
Oh, I thought you were talking about one of Peter's books.
Okay, no. I'm just saying, talking about Peter. Okay,
yeah.
So you see, he said, "I've never eaten anything common or unclean." So those are two different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then we go to stay in Mark 7, and we come down to what defiles a man. And remember, common is the opposite of holy. Where we at? We go to verse 15 so we can look up defiled or defile, what that word means. Come to the interlinear. All right. Where is it? Defile. Okay. So that you're looking you can see my screen, everything?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
It says defiling down at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
We click on that word to see what that means. And it's, I don't know how you say that, koinoo, however you say it. You see the definition is to make common. Right there?
Uh-huh.
See it highlighted?
Yeah.
Okay. Now the usage, it's translated in different ways, like to make unclean, pollute, desecrate. But we know from the context of what we're talking about, they're talking about in regards to common and holy. So when Jesus says in Mark, or in the passage that we're talking about, let me get back to it so we can put it on screen. He says, he says, and when, wait, hold on. Okay, there is nothing from without a man that entering into him can defile him, but the things which come out of him, those are they that defile the man. So what he's saying is nothing that goes into you can make you common or unholy, which is true. It can make you unclean, like in the sense how I was saying, like for the rest of the day, because if that food is in you, you're unclean, you're carrying that into the temple, even though it's inside you, like it's that deep, right? So I knew she was going to do that. This girl leaning on the screen.
She fell through.
It finally came off the track.
Oh my god.
Okay. So anyway, let's go back to Mark. Okay. So what they're talking about is not clean and unclean according to the law, because these are Pharisees. They're not, like I said the last time, is like if Jesus told them, oh, you can eat whatever food regardless of the law. So if he said that to Pharisees, they would have got on him right away, because they were waiting for any little thing. They kept testing him to see if he would say something out of line so they could bring him up on charges. So
why were they asking that?
So they were asking him why his disciples didn't wash their hands before they ate. You see what I'm saying? Because that's their custom.
Wait,
the tradition, because they believe so like strongly that you had to purify your hands and stuff, and so you wouldn't pollute the food, and so we know they're not eating unclean food like ritual, like by law, like they weren't eating pork. You know what I'm saying? We're talking about bread.
And they were just that their hands weren't washed. That's the bottom line.
Because their belief was that you could pollute even the bread if you have hands that are dirty. And so the way so then I was going to tell you about the common thing. Something could become uncommon if it was like stored in the same place as an unclean food. Like if you had pork and lamb stored in the same place, they would say that that lamb is now common because they don't know if it touched the pork or whatever. Like it's not sanctified anymore. You know what I'm saying?
It's been defiled.
It's been defiled. So they'll say that because it was once holy, but now it's defiled because we don't know if it actually touched the pork, but we can't take a chance. So
the fact that it was with it just made it defiled.
Made it defiled. And so it's not unclean, because unclean is defined by the law, right? Defiled is just something that in the middle where they're saying, look, we don't know, but it's no longer sanctified or clean anymore. It's just common. It's not holy. Like, you know what I'm saying?
So defile kind of means dirty, but dirty doesn't mean unclean.
Not in a biblical sense of
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. So what else was I going to show you? Okay, we got defile, we got all that stuff. And I pulled up something from the Jewish encyclopedia to kind of talk about the Pharisees. It's a long article, but it actually breaks open a lot of stuff, because it tells you about the stuff that they added to the Sabbath day and the new moons and all that stuff. And those are things that were talked about in Colossians about don't let nobody judge you for how you in respect of those things. They're talking about the Pharisees and their extra laws that they put in. We talked about that, but I'll leave you with that link so you can read it, so you can you can see the Pharisees got real deep into all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I had that, and then I asked you about if you had the Safari app.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So I'm gonna see if we can actually pull that up on here. I don't know if we can, but hopefully we can, because you'll see some them talking about it, how they viewed unwashed hands in the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm about to show you some. It's kind of crazy. Let me see. Okay, yeah, here we go. Sota 4B. If I can. Oh, yep. There we go. Okay. Man, I gotta get to. Okay, so what this is. This is the Talmud. This is where the rabbis and all those people, they start talking about the law and coming up with all this stuff that's not in Torah, but they put these laws on the people. And what they did was, after the temple was destroyed and everything, they started developing these writings, and they incorporated the Pharisees' laws into this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm gonna find the part where it's talking about the washing. Is it this one or is it? Yeah, here we go. So if you're on there, if you can see it, right?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. You got your phone?
Yeah.
If you open up the app and you go to Talmud and click on Sota, however you say that, and then you go to it's chapter 1, 4b. You find the part where you'll find this part in there. But so anyway, he says, concerning anyone who eats bread without washing his hands, it is as if he engaged in sexual intercourse with a prostitute. Dude, as it is stated, for on account of a harlot, a man is brought to a loaf of bread, right?
Wait a minute. Oh yeah, I see it. Okay. Wow.
Okay, and then you go down some. It says, anyone who treats the ritual of washing hands with contempt is uprooted from the world. So like, if you go against the washing of hands thing, then you're uprooted from the world. So they not only had a thing called uncleanness, they had levels of uncleanness.
Wow.
It was a level 3, a 2, or 1. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this is what Jesus is responding to, because they thought they made you unholy if you were no longer, you weren't set apart, and that's why he when you defile the food, you pollute it, right?
Yeah.
So if we come back to Mark 7 and see what he said, because the apostles, it was something else I wanted to show you too, but I'll get this first. It says that now in Mark 7 and 17, it says, when he entered into the house from the people, his disciples asked him concerning the parable, and he said in 19, we already read this, so I'll just say he said nothing that goes in can defile you, but it's what comes out. But he was saying it can't defile you what goes in, because it enters not into the heart but into the belly and goes out in the draught, purging all meats, sanctifying all meats. So remember, we're talking about things becoming common. It's because they've been made dirty. But when you eat, the waste goes. So he's saying it goes in your stomach and goes out into the draught, and so it purifies whatever you ate, because the waste is gone, right? And so he says, but this is what comes out of the man defiles him. And now remember, we're talking about the difference between holy and unholy, right? And so what comes out of the heart, he says, proceeds evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, so on and so forth. I keep looking at my phone like I'm like that's the camera, but this is the camera. I gotta put this over. So you see what's going on here. Like, look at all these things. Like, these things make you unholy,
right?
You see, and so yes, eating the food makes you unclean. Ritually, like you can't go to the temple for the rest of the day, but that's temporary. But to be holy, the nation of Israel was set apart, which means holy. So he's saying, if you eat unclean food, that doesn't mean you're not holy anymore. You're just unclean for right now.
Right.
You see? So this is what we're really talking about. Now, to drive this point home just a little bit more, you have to remember that he said the disciples asked him, what is the meaning of this parable? So it's just like what I was telling you when he says in verse 16, if any man have ears to hear, let him hear. That's the key indication that this is a parable, and you need to try to, like, it's almost like you're reading like some symbolic poetry. You got to get like what the message is out of it, right? That's why he says that. If you're able to figure it out, you'll figure it out. But then they ask him, like, what is this meaning of this parable? So since we know this is a parable, there's one more definition we want to look at, and that is, what is a parable? And I know you understand the basic concept of a parable, but just to get just to get a true like definition of it.
Right.
So did I click the right word?
No.
I did. No, this is a parable. Wait, hold on. Let me just make sure I clicked the right one, because I had a different. I mean, it's basically the same definition or same wording, but yeah, it's a parable. It just looks a little bit different, because I guess the literal definition of the word is to expose oneself to danger. But if you think about it, you're taught parables, so you understand concepts that keep you from danger of you're losing your soul. So it's kind of funny that it goes that way. But the way it's used in metaphorical sense, it's like it's a comparison. So like you're talking about food defiling you versus, or and stuff like that, and he's using it as like a metaphor, right? And he says a parable often of those uttered by our Lord, a proverb, an adage, a teaching aid cast alongside the truth being taught. This casts additional light by using an arresting or familiar analogy, which is often fictitious or metaphorical, but not necessarily. So we know, and I know you were saying, well, why would he say that? And it was like, because it's a parable. It's just a metaphor. And I think the people, and that's why I said last time, you got to think about who he was talking to. Like his audience, they understand that this man is not telling us we can break the law. Like that, you can't say that in Israel around a bunch of Pharisees. You know what I mean? Like they understood it was a parable, especially when after he got done saying it, he said, if anyone have ears to hear, let him hear. It's like, okay, this is not literally saying, you see what I mean? But even still, he wasn't even talking about clean, unclean. He's talking about holy and common. So that's where, there's a lot more to look into as far as the Pharisees and their traditions and what they thought it meant when you ate food with dirty hands. It's like I've seen enough to say that I'll fully understand this passage, though. That's kind of why I'm presenting it now with as much information I have. See, was there anything else I was going to say?
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah. Let me see.
All right.
Okay. So yeah, man, I think that's I think that explains it.
Yeah. I mean, it does. I think I definitely can see that this passage a lot more clearly. You know what I mean? Because honestly, I didn't even. And see, this is why it's so important to get full context of what you're even reading, because I didn't even know, and I kind of feel like I'm kind of like ashamed of this. I won't do this again. I didn't even know that they were talking about the washing hands part.
Oh,
I didn't even know that. I just thought that they were talking. I thought he was talking about them eating some food that
Period.
was eating food that they weren't supposed to. I thought that was the context, but see, that's that's why you can't do that. You got to understand what they're talking about. Which
like we read it, but I know like I'm reading, you're listening. You may not like catch everything.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But yeah, like I wasn't. I had an understanding, like without me seeing all this other background information, I understood. Like I guess my starting point was he just got done telling them to follow the commandments, so I know he's not telling them not to. You know what I'm saying? And to know, all the other stuff in the other scriptures, I'm like, yeah, that can't mean that. He must mean something else. But I didn't really have enough details to like explain it the way that I did just now.
Right.
But because of that conversation, though, I know so much more about what Jesus was when he was talking about, like people establishing their own religion. That's not from God, but they just put their own commandments in there. I know a lot more about that now. And it's pretty deep, like just stuff that they added. Like I'm telling you, Colossians, we went to Colossians before about don't let nobody judge you in respect of the Sabbath or new moons or whatever. Jesus would have said the same thing, because the Pharisees, they came up with what I showed you was the Sabbath day's journey. They came up with that. They changed the Day of Atonement from a sacrifice to, we just get forgiven on that day without doing all that stuff. Like they changed a lot, but they had took control of the what you call it, the temple. They like, and they established a lot of the synagogues and stuff like that, and they were real big on recruiting people to be Jews, and it's like a whole thing that you have to read about on the Pharisees to, you know what I'm saying? But it's crazy. And so knowing that, and then going back and looking at all these scriptures where it's talking about, like you would think that Paul and everybody is telling you to not obey the law, but what they're talking about is that Jewish religion that had developed at that time. And he even says, I was exceeding in the religion of the Jews. That's very strange to say about something that's supposed to be God's religion in a sense, right? But he said the religion of the Jews.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Like that sounds a lot different. There's a reason he said that. And he said he was zealous for the law and the tradition of his fathers. Those traditions are all these things that Jesus is saying, get away from that. Follow God, because these people, like he said in Mark 7, he said, y'all neglect God's commandments, but you observe, your traditions. So they gave more power to their religion than God. Right. So anyway,
see a lot of that going on.
Yeah, and this is an extension. Mark 7 is an extension of that conversation. Okay. So you got the full understanding, man. I mean, you probably got more understanding than most people, right now. Like,
absolutely, man. Right on. And send me some more information. I want to read more about what you read about the washing the hands, man, because that's just interesting to me. Like, that's just
if you pulled it up, then it's mostly
it's just right all there. That right there.
There's other stuff. I got a bunch of links. I'll have to I'll like email you, because it's a lot to try to text, but I'll send you. I'll make an email for you so you can have it all. Like,
we need to make like a Google Doc and just have a running